Welcome to Truth Watch, where we go beyond the headlines to uncover the stories, the choices, and the lessons behind every event. Let's dive in.
You know, some crimes are so deeply unsettling, they make you question everything you thought you knew about people, about good and evil. The case of Zhang, it's one of those. This isn't just about the crime itself. We're going to deconstruct the complete psychological collapse of a man, and maybe even more importantly, the system that just completely failed to see him falling. So, let's get into it.
To even begin to wrap our heads around this, we have to start with this central, almost unbelievable paradox. The two totally opposite people that existed inside one man, only 9 years apart.
I mean, just look at this. It's staggering. On the left, you've got the picture of a model student. We're talking honor student, class officer, praised for his great attitude. And on the right, the blueprint for a cold-blooded, calculated attack. How on earth did those two realities exist in the same person?
And that is the question at the heart of all this, right? This wasn't some snap decision. It was a slow 9-year disintegration. To understand it, we really have to trace the path that takes someone from school commendations to absolute carnage. Okay, so to get this, we have to look bigger than just one guy's choices. This story is also about all the social and institutional safety nets that were supposed to be there but just weren't, as he fell into this really deep, dark place. You can literally see the collapse happening step by step right here. So in 2016, he's this celebrated graduate. But then, boom, 2022. That's the huge turning point. He gets kicked out of the military, and with that, he loses his structure, his purpose, everything. That kicks off this 3-year void of total isolation. He cuts off everyone, family, friends, you name it. And by the end, he's a fugitive. He's not just disconnected, he's actively against the system.
And this quote from therapist Li Sichuan really hits the nail on the head. We can't just write this off as one bad apple. You gotta ask, what were the holes in our society's safety net that he fell through? The military let him go, sure, but was there any follow-up? He ghosted his family, but was there any kind of community support there to even notice he was gone?
So as he's becoming more and more isolated, this terrifying inner world starts to build. To try and understand what was going on inside Zhang Wen's mind during those silent years, experts have come up with 3 really distinct and, honestly, pretty chilling psychological theories.
First up, psychologist Huang Yifan says we need to look past the obvious stuff, like anger or rage. She argues that the most dangerous state of mind isn't some big, fiery emotion. No, it's the total absence of it. It's this deep, profound numbness where absolutely nothing matters anymore. This theory paints this really disturbing picture of a guy who felt completely worthless, but at the very same time couldn't stand being ignored. It's such a toxic combination. He knew on an intellectual level that what he was planning would cause immense pain, but he just didn't have that emotional connection to actually feel it. The plan, the act itself, became more real to him than the people he was going to hurt. Now, the second theory comes from a criminology professor, Tai Shen-Feng, who has a different take. He says this wasn't just about violence. It was theater. It was a show. And Zhang Wen had cast himself as the lead in his own horrific production, all designed to make the world finally look at him. And this idea of a performance crime actually helps explain some of the weirder parts of the attack. Like, why use smoke bombs? They weren't meant to kill. They were meant to create chaos, to build suspense. It was all about setting the stage for his big, violent entrance. He needed an audience.
And finally, we have a third perspective, this one from the medical world. Dr. Cheng Chiaming basically suggests that we might be looking at a fundamental difference in his brain's wiring, a mind that literally doesn't process things like guilt or punishment the way most of us do.
And this is a really important distinction. Someone with ASPD might do something impulsive and then feel bad about it later, but a psychopath, they're missing that fundamental emotional hardware. They get the rules, sure, but the rules are just tools to be used or ignored. And according to this theory, Zhang Wen's careful long-term planning, all done without any sign of guilt, lines up way more closely with a psychopathic profile.
So how did all these psychological ideas actually play out in the crime itself? Well, as the prosecutors figured out, this attack was anything but random. It was a carefully crafted statement to the world.
The digital trail he left is just wow. 1,000 810 searches. Let that sink in. Searches for keywords about mass murder. This wasn't a sudden snap. This was an obsession. He was studying, he was researching for over a year, basically treating past killings like case studies for his own project. This led the prosecutors to call it an expressive crime. The violence was just the language he was using, but the message was the real point. His goal wasn't just to inflict harm, it was to scream his existence at a society he felt had made him invisible. And you can see how this links right back to that idea of a performance crime, right? The shock was the entire goal. And just look at the level of detail. He studied other attacks so he could correct their mistakes. He drew up maps with codes for where he'd use fire and where he'd use smoke. He bought a tactical vest and 13 different knives. This kind of cold, methodical planning, seemingly free of any guilt, it's just chilling, and it aligns perfectly with that psychopathic profile we were talking about. So, okay, after breaking down the man, his mind, and this horrific crime, we're left with the hardest, but probably the most important question. What can we possibly learn from something like this? And I think the key takeaway really comes from that therapist, Lee Si-Swan, who brings it all back to the system. See, it's really easy to just label Zhang Wen a monster and then just move on. It's a lot harder, but so much more important, to ask if our own societal safety nets are strong enough to catch the next person who starts to fall. And that leaves us with a really tough question to think about. In a world where it's honestly easier than ever to get disconnected, to just slip through the cracks and disappear into your own private world of rage and despair, whose job is it to notice? How do we start to rebuild those connections, those safety nets, to prevent the next total system collapse before it's too late?
Crime doesn't begin with violence. It begins in the mind. And prevention begins with awareness. The more we understand patterns, warning signs, and human psychology, the less power fear has over us. Stay aware, stay informed, stay thoughtful. This is Truth Watch, where we look deeper.